"Your daughter says you're no longer welcome at family Thanksgiving," the hostess said, her voice dripping with practiced politeness. Sarah Martinez set down the deed to Bella Vista Restaurant, ink still wet from the notary's stamp. "Tell her the reservation's been canceled," she said, calm as autumn rain. "I bought the place." Outside, Emma was posting Instagram stories about her drama-free holiday. Inside, Sarah was rewriting the guest list one signature at a time. The voicemail had arrived on a Tuesday morning while Sarah was deadheading the last of her autumn mums. Her hands were dirty from the garden soil, fingernails caked with earth from the bulbs she'd been planting for next spring's display. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon and coffee, remnants of her morning routine that had remained unchanged for the 3 years since David's funeral. She'd reached for her phone with soil-stained fingers, expecting maybe a call from the VA about her benefits review, or perhaps Martha from the book club confirming their Thursday meeting. Instead, she heard Emma's voice, artificially bright that way that meant trouble was coming wrapped in forced cheer. "Hi, Mom, it's me. So, I wanted to talk to you about Thanksgiving this year. Brad and I have been discussing it, and we think it might be better if you didn't come this time. It's nothing personal, really. It's just that last year was a bit tense. You know how you get when Uncle Mike starts talking politics, and Brad's parents are coming this year, and we just want everything to be smooth and peaceful. I'm sure you understand. We love you, but maybe it's time to start some new traditions, you know? Anyway, call me back if you want to talk about it. Love you. Bye." Sarah had stood there in her kitchen, phone pressed to her ear even after the message ended, listening to the dial tone like it might offer some explanation for what she'd just heard. The automatic voice kicked in, asking if she wanted to save, replay, or delete the message. She pressed save and set the phone down next to the sink with the same careful precision she'd used to disarm improvised explosive devices in Kandahar 15 years ago. The silence in the house felt different then, not the comfortable quiet of a woman who'd learned to enjoy her own company, but the hollow kind that echoes in places where voices used to be. She washed her hands slowly, watching the dark soil swirl down the drain, each granule carrying away with it another piece of the morning's innocence. Her reflection in the kitchen window showed a woman of 52, silver threading through, dark brown hair that she wore pulled back in the same practical ponytail she'd favored since her army days. Laugh lines around brown eyes that had seen too much, and hands that were steady despite the earthquake that had just shifted the foundation of her world. Emma's words played on repeat in her mind as she moved through the house, straightening things that didn't need straightening, her military training asserting itself in the ritual of creating order from chaos. You know how you get when Uncle Mike starts talking politics. How she got. As if her veteran's perspective on foreign policy was somehow embarrassing rather than earned through 2 tours in Afghanistan and a Bronze Star that sat in a drawer because she'd never been one for display. Brad's parents are coming this year. Brad's parents, who she'd met exactly twice, both times enduring their thinly veiled comments about military spending and their concerns about Emma marrying into a family with complications. The house felt larger than usual as she wandered from room to room, past the dining table where she'd hosted Thanksgiving for the past 20 years, even after David died. The table that could seat 12, but had gradually accommodated fewer and fewer guests. As Emma grew busier with her new life, her new priorities, her new shame about her mother's background, Sarah paused in the doorway of what had been Emma's bedroom, now converted to her home office, but still containing traces of the daughter who used to race down the stairs on Thanksgiving morning, eager to help with the cranberry sauce and steal tastes of stuffing. The irony wasn't lost on her that Emma, who had never missed a meal or lacked for anything, was now concerned about keeping things smooth and peaceful by excluding the woman who had sacrificed 2 decades of military service to provide that very peace and smoothness. Sarah had left the Army when Emma was 12, choosing stability over advancement, choosing her daughter's needs over her own career trajectory. She'd taken a job with the State Veterans Affairs Office, steady but unremarkable, The kind of position that paid the bills and left her evenings free for soccer games and school plays, and the thousand small responsibilities that came with raising a child alone after David's accident. But Emma had grown up, moved away, married Brad with his insurance executive father and his interior designer mother, and somewhere along the way had begun to see her mother's service not as sacrifice but as liability. Sarah had noticed it starting about 2 years ago. The way Emma would change the subject when Sarah's army stories came up at family gatherings. The way she'd started introducing her as my mom rather than my mom, she's a veteran. The gradual erosion of pride replaced by something that looked uncomfortably like embarrassment. The phone rang again, jarring her from her thoughts. This time it was Martha from the book club, her voice warm with the kind of genuine affection that had become increasingly rare in Sarah's life. "Sarah, honey, I just wanted to confirm we're still on for Thursday. I picked up that new Lee Child novel you mentioned, and I'm dying to hear what you think about the military accuracy in his latest. You know how he usually gets those details, right? But this one had me wondering." Sarah found herself smiling for the first time since Emma's message. "I'll be there, Martha. Wouldn't miss it." She paused, then added, "And I'll bring some of those oatmeal cookies you like. I have a feeling I'm going to have some extra time for baking this season." After hanging up, Sarah sat down at her kitchen table and pulled out the yellow legal pad she used for grocery lists and to-do items. At the top of a fresh page, she wrote, "Thanksgiving 2024, in the block letters that had served her well through countless military reports. Underneath, she began making a list, not of menu items or guest arrangements, but of facts. Emma's message, saved and time-stamped. The reservation at Bella Vista restaurant that Emma had mentioned in passing during their last phone call 3 weeks ago. How excited she was about their first Thanksgiving there. How sophisticated it would be to have someone else do the cooking. For once. Sarah had driven past Bella Vista countless times. A upscale farm-to-table restaurant that had opened 5 years ago in a restored Victorian mansion on the edge of town. She knew the owner, Giuseppe Torino, by reputation, if not personally. He'd been featured in the local paper when the restaurant first opened, an Italian immigrant who'd worked his way up from dishwasher to owner, the kind of American dream story that usually resonated with people until it became inconvenient to acknowledge. The research phase began that afternoon. Sarah approached it with the same methodical thoroughness she'd brought to intelligence gathering in Afghanistan, the same systematic attention to detail that had kept her unit safe through 2 deployments. She started with public records, property, tax assessments, business licenses, health department inspections. Bella Vista Restaurant, LLC, incorporated in Delaware. Registered agent Giuseppe Torino. Annual revenue estimates based on seating capacity and average price point. Staff size, overhead costs, profit margins calculated from the kind of financial forensics she'd learned to apply when investigating contracting fraud overseas. By evening, she had a complete picture of Bella Vista's financial health. Profitable. But not spectacularly so, carrying more debt than ideal. Vulnerable to the kind of economic pressures that had been squeezing restaurants since the pandemic. The kind of business that might be open to the right offer from someone with sufficient capital and the cash to close quickly. Sarah opened her laptop and logged into her investment accounts for the first time in months. The numbers staring back at her represented 22 years of military discipline, modest living, and careful investment. David's life insurance, still largely untouched 3 years after his death. Her thrift savings plan account, built steadily, through deployments when there was nothing to spend money on except care packages sent home. The inheritance from her parents, who died within 6 months of each other 2 years ago, leaving her their Iowa farmhouse and the surprising sum they'd accumulated through a lifetime of frugal living. The total was more than enough. More than enough to buy a restaurant, more than enough to make a statement, more than enough to demonstrate that the woman Emma was embarrassed to claim as family was not quite as powerless as she'd assumed. Sarah stared at the screen for a long time, feeling something cold and calculating settle in her chest like winter wind through prairie grass. She pulled up Giuseppe Torino's contact information and composed an email, professional but direct. She identified herself, mentioned her interest in potentially purchasing the restaurant, and suggested a meeting at his earliest convenience. She attached a financial pre-qualification letter from her bank, obtained earlier that year when she'd been considering purchasing a larger house, proving her ability to make a substantial cash offer. Before sending the email, Sarah walked to her bedroom and opened the bottom drawer of her dresser, pushing aside folded sweaters to reveal a small wooden box David had made for her during his brief woodworking phase. Inside, wrapped in tissue, paper, was her Bronze Star, the medal she'd earned for her actions during a convoy ambush outside Kabul. She held it in her palm, feeling its weight, remembering the day she'd received it. The pride in Emma's 12-year-old eyes as she'd watched her mother recognized for bravery and leadership under fire. That little girl had been proud of her mother, the soldier. The woman Emma had become was embarrassed by her mother, the veteran. Sarah wrapped the medal carefully and placed it back in the box, but she didn't close the drawer. Instead, she reached for the framed photograph beside it, a picture of her unit taken on their last day in Afghanistan. 12 faces, some of them gone now, all of them forever connected by what they'd shared and sacrificed. She thought about her soldiers, men and women who'd trusted her judgment, followed her orders, looked to her for leadership in situations where the wrong decision meant death. They'd never questioned her competence, never suggested she was too intense or too political, or too much of anything. They'd seen her as she was, a professional who got things done, who protected the people under her command, who earned respect through action rather than demanding it through relationship. Sarah returned to her laptop and clicked send on the email, to Giuseppe Torino. Then she opened a new document and began typing, creating a business plan with the same precision she'd once applied to mission planning. If she was going to buy a restaurant, she was going to run it properly. If Emma wanted drama-free holidays, Sarah would give her something truly dramatic to consider. The phone remained silent for the rest of the evening. No call back from Emma, no follow-up to explain or soften the blow, just silence from the daughter, who had apparently decided that her mother's presence was an inconvenience to be managed rather than a relationship to be cherished. Sarah made herself a simple dinner, ate it alone at the kitchen table while reading the restaurant industry publications she'd downloaded, and went to bed early with the satisfaction of a plan beginning to take shape. Tomorrow, she would begin the process of showing Emma exactly what kind of woman she'd chosen to exclude from the family table. But before we dive deeper into how I turned my daughter's rejection into the most expensive lesson she never wanted to learn, I need to ask you something. Drop a comment below and tell me, what's the most hurtful thing a family member has ever said to you? The kind of comment that sits in your chest like a stone, the one that makes you question everything you thought you knew about your relationship with them. And while you're thinking about that, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because this story is about to get a whole lot more complicated, and trust me, you're going to want to see how deep this rabbit hole goes. Giuseppe Torino called back within 6 hours of receiving Sarah's email, his voice carrying the slight accent that made his words sound more thoughtful than they probably were. She'd been expecting to play phone tag for days, maybe weeks, the way business discussions usually unfolded in small towns where everyone knew everyone else's business and nothing happened quickly. Instead, his response was immediate and intrigued, the kind of interest that suggested her timing might be better than she'd dared to hope. "Mrs. Martinez," he said, pronouncing her name with careful precision. "I received your message about Bella Vista. I must say I wasn't expecting to hear from someone with your qualifications. Your pre-qualification letter is quite impressive." There was a pause, the sound of papers rustling in the background. Then his voice returned with what sounded like genuine curiosity. "May I ask what draws you to the restaurant business? It's not typically a field that attracts people with your background." Sarah had prepared for this question, knowing that her transition from military service to restaurant ownership would require explanation. But sitting in her kitchen with morning coffee growing cold in front of her and autumn sunlight streaming through windows that looked out on a garden she'd tended alone for 3 years, the practiced answer felt inadequate. Instead, she found herself speaking with the kind of honesty that had served her well in command situations where lives depended on clear communication. "Mr. Torino, I've spent most of my adult life in service to others, first in the military and then working with veterans through the state office. I understand hospitality in the truest sense of the word, the responsibility that comes with taking care of people who've placed their trust in you. I also understand logistics, supply chain management, personnel oversight, and crisis management under pressure. The restaurant industry might be new to me, but leadership principles are universal." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "And I have personal reasons for wanting to establish myself in this particular business at this particular time. Sometimes life presents opportunities that align with both financial sense and personal satisfaction." Giuseppe chuckled softly, a sound that suggested he understood more than she'd actually said. "Personal satisfaction, yes. This business, it gives you that or it destroys you completely. There is no middle ground. Tell me, Mrs. Martinez, are you available to meet this afternoon? I find that serious conversations about serious money require looking someone in the eye." They arranged to meet at Bella Vista at 3 o'clock, during the quiet hours between lunch and dinner service, when the restaurant would be empty enough for private conversation, but active enough for Sarah to observe. The operation in action. She spent the morning preparing for the meeting with the same thoroughness she'd brought to pre-deployment briefings, researching everything she could find about Giuseppe's background, the restaurant's history, and the local dining market. Giuseppe Torino had arrived in the United States 28 years ago with an engineering degree from the University of Bologna and enough English to get himself hired as a dishwasher at a chain restaurant outside Chicago. He'd worked his way through every position in food service while studying for his professional engineer license at night, eventually spending 15 years designing municipal water treatment systems before deciding to follow his original passion for food and hospitality. The transition had taken him another 5 years of working in other people's kitchens before he'd saved enough to open Bella Vista. The restaurant itself occupied a 3-story Victorian mansion that had been carefully restored to highlight its original architectural details while accommodating modern kitchen equipment and dining room flow. The building sat on 2 acres of landscaped grounds that included a small herb garden and outdoor seating area that could accommodate wedding receptions and private parties. Previous owners had struggled with the property's maintenance costs and the challenge of operating fine dining in a town where most residents considered Applebee's an upscale night out. Sarah arrived 15 minutes early, partly from military habit and partly to observe the restaurant's afternoon operations without the pressure of immediate conversation. The hostess, a young woman with the kind of professional politeness that suggested good training, seated her at a corner table with a view of both the dining room and the kitchen pass. She ordered coffee and watched the controlled chaos of prep work, noting the efficiency of movement, the cleanliness of surfaces, the way staff members communicated with each other. The lunch crowd was thinning out, mostly business people finishing. Late meetings over dessert and coffee, a few couples sharing appetizers and wine, the kind of steady midweek traffic that suggested local loyalty rather than tourist novelty. Sarah counted covers, estimated check averages, observed table turnover rates, and calculated the kind of revenue numbers that would support the operation she was considering purchasing. Giuseppe appeared at exactly 3 o'clock, emerging from the kitchen with the confident bearing of someone comfortable in his domain. He was shorter than she'd expected, maybe 5'8", with graying hair and the kind of permanent tan that suggested outdoor hobbies. His handshake was firm without being aggressive, his eye contact direct without being challenging. The grip of someone accustomed to physical work despite his current role as owner and operator. "Mrs. Martinez, welcome to Bella Vista. I hope the coffee meets your standards." He settled into the chair across from her with the easy grace of someone who'd spent decades in customer service. I took the liberty of asking my kitchen to prepare a small selection of our signature dishes. I find that people make better decisions about restaurants when they understand what we're actually selling. Over the next hour, Sarah tasted her way through Giuseppe's vision of modern American cuisine with Italian influences, each dish presented with the story behind its creation and the local suppliers who provided key ingredients. The food was excellent, the kind of careful preparation and presentation that justified the prices she'd researched online. But more importantly, it was consistent. Every element showed the attention to detail and quality control that separated successful restaurants from expensive hobbies. "You have a beautiful operation here," Sarah said as Giuseppe cleared the tasting plates. "The food is exceptional, your staff is professional, and your location is perfect for the market you're serving. So I have to ask the obvious question. Why are you considering selling?" Giuseppe leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from professional hospitality to something more personal. "Mrs. Martinez, I am 63 years old. I have been working in kitchens since I was 16, first in Bologna, then here in America. I love this business, but it requires energy that I no longer have in unlimited supply. My wife wants to travel while we are still healthy enough to enjoy it. My daughter lives in California and has made it clear that she has no interest in taking over the restaurant." He gestured toward the dining room, encompassing the carefully maintained Victorian details and the quiet afternoon light filtering through tall windows. "Bella Vista represents 20 years of my life and every dollar I could scrape together. I want to sell it to someone who will maintain what I've built. Someone who understands that this is not just a business, but a commitment to the community." Sarah recognized the weight behind his words, the particular pride of someone who'd built something substantial from nothing through decades of discipline and sacrifice. It was the same pride she'd felt watching her soldiers develop into leaders, the same satisfaction that came from knowing your work had lasting value beyond immediate rewards. "Mr. Torino, I appreciate your honesty and I want to be equally direct with you. I have the capital to make a cash offer that would allow you to retire comfortably and pursue those travel plans with your wife. I also have the management background to maintain your standards and the personal motivation to succeed in this venture. But I need you to understand that my timeline is compressed. I need to close this transaction quickly, ideally within the next 3 weeks." Giuseppe raised an eyebrow, the first sign of surprise he'd shown during their conversation. 3 weeks is very fast for a restaurant sale, Mrs. Martinez. There are inspections, licenses to transfer, inventory to assess, staff to notify. May I ask why the urgency?" Sarah met his gaze steadily, the same direct eye contact she'd used when briefing. "Commanding officers on mission-critical intelligence. I have family obligations that require this business to be operational by the 4th Thursday of November. Personal reasons, but they're not negotiable." For a moment, Giuseppe studied her face with the careful attention of someone reading between lines. Then he smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his features from professional courtesy to something approaching delight. "Mrs. Martinez, I have been in the hospitality business for 40 years. I have learned to recognize when someone has personal reasons that run deeper than profit margins. Your timeline is aggressive, but it's not impossible if we're both committed to making it happen." He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a business card, writing something on the back before sliding it across the table. "This is my accountant's contact information. He has all the financial records, tax returns, profit and loss statements, everything you'll need for due diligence. I'm asking $2.4 million for the property, equipment, goodwill, and existing inventory. The price is firm, but I'm willing to work with you on timing if you're serious about a cash purchase." Sarah looked at the number he'd written on the card, comparing it to the estimates she'd calculated during her research. It was fair, perhaps even slightly below market value for a turnkey operation with Bella Vista's reputation and location. More importantly, it was within her available capital, leaving enough reserve for operating expenses and the kind of improvements she was already envisioning. "Mr. Torino, I'll have my attorney contact you tomorrow morning to begin the paperwork. I'll need a complete financial audit and structural inspection, but assuming everything checks out, I'm prepared to make a full cash offer at your asking price with a closing date of November 15th. Giuseppe extended his hand across the table, and Sarah shook it, feeling the calluses that spoke of decades spent chopping vegetables and hauling equipment, the strength that came from building something lasting with your own hands. "Mrs. Martinez, I believe you are going to do very well in this business, and I suspect your family obligations are going to be quite satisfied." As Sarah drove home through the late afternoon light, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction at how quickly the first phase of her plan was falling into place. Giuseppe's eagerness to sell, the reasonable price, the compressed timeline that would put her in control of Bella Vista just in time for Thanksgiving. All of it aligned with a precision that felt almost military in its efficiency. But satisfaction was tempered by the knowledge that purchasing the restaurant was only the beginning. Emma still had no idea what was coming, still believed that her mother would quietly accept exclusion from family gatherings, still assumed that the woman who'd raised her alone was too polite and too powerless to make waves that might disrupt her carefully curated holiday plans. Sarah pulled into her driveway as the sun was setting, painting her small house in golden light that made everything look temporarily perfect. Tomorrow she would begin the process of due diligence and legal paperwork, the methodical documentation that would transfer ownership of Bella Vista from Giuseppe's hands to hers. But tonight, she had phone calls to make, starting with her attorney and ending with Emma. It was time to let her daughter know that Thanksgiving dinner was going to be more interesting than she'd planned. The call came at 7:30 on a Thursday evening while Sarah was reviewing the restaurant's equipment inventory, her reading glasses perched on her nose, and Giuseppe's detailed spreadsheets spread across her dining room table like battle plans. She'd been absorbed in the minutiae of commercial kitchen operations, calculating replacement costs for aging equipment, and reviewing maintenance schedules for everything from the walk-in coolers to the espresso machine that Giuseppe had warned her was temperamental, but beloved by the regular customers who ordered cappuccinos with their dessert. Her phone buzzed against the mahogany surface, Emma's name appearing on the screen with the photo Sarah had taken 2 Christmases ago, back when her daughter still smiled genuinely in family pictures instead of offering the practiced expression she'd perfected for social media. Sarah let it ring twice before answering, partly from habit and partly because she wanted to finish reading the paragraph about the dishwasher's recurring drainage issues that would need professional attention before the holiday season. "Hi, Emma," she said, keeping her voice neutral, the same tone she'd used for routine status reports during her military service. Professional, pleasant, offering no emotional ammunition that could be used against her later. "Mom, hi." Emma's voice carried that particular strain that suggested she was multitasking, probably scrolling through her phone or organizing something while talking. "I just wanted to follow up on my message from earlier this week, about Thanksgiving. I know I left it on voicemail, but I wanted to make sure we talked it through properly." Sarah set down her pen and leaned back in her chair, noting the way Emma had phrased the conversation as if they were discussing a minor scheduling conflict, rather than a daughter informing her mother that she was no longer welcome at family gatherings. The word properly was particularly interesting, suggesting that Emma had convinced herself this was a reasonable discussion between equals rather than an announcement delivered by voicemail like a cancellation notice. "I got your message," Sarah replied. "You said you wanted this year's Thanksgiving to be drama-free, and you felt my presence might complicate things with Brad's parents. I understand your position." There was a pause, and Sarah could hear the faint sound of television in the background, some cooking show or lifestyle program that Emma probably had on while she organized her evening routine. The normalcy of it struck Sarah as particularly jarring, the idea that her daughter could discuss excluding her from holiday traditions, while simultaneously watching strangers demonstrate pumpkin pie techniques. "Right, exactly. I'm so glad you understand, Mom. I was worried you might take it personally, but I knew you'd see the bigger picture. Brad's parents are they're more traditional, you know? And they have some opinions about military spending and foreign policy that might clash with your perspective. I just want everyone to be comfortable. Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. The same sensation she'd experienced in Afghanistan, when intelligence reports revealed that a supposedly secure area had been compromised. Emma wasn't just excluding her from Thanksgiving. She was asking her to accept that exclusion as a favor, to be grateful for being erased from family celebrations in service of other people's comfort. Emma, help me understand something. When you say Brad's parents have opinions about military spending, are you referring to the defense budget that funded the training and equipment that kept me alive during 2 combat deployments? Or are you talking about the veteran benefits that I earned through 22 years of service to this country? The pause was longer this time, and when Emma spoke again, her voice had shifted to the carefully patient tone she used when she thought she was dealing with someone who was being unnecessarily difficult. Mom, see? This is exactly what I'm talking about. You get so intense about military stuff. Brad's dad was just saying that maybe we spend too much on defense when we could be investing in education or infrastructure. It's not personal. Sarah stood up and walked to her living room window, looking out at the street where neighbors were bringing in packages from their porches and preparing for their own family gatherings. Normal people with normal family problems, she thought. Not daughters who considered their mother's service records an embarrassment to be managed rather than a sacrifice to be honored. Emma, when Brad's father talks about defense spending being too high, is he aware that those expenditures include the medical care that saved my life when I was injured in a convoy attack outside Kandahar? Does he understand that the veteran benefits he apparently finds excessive are what allowed me to transition back to civilian life and raise you as a single mother after your father died? Mom, please don't make this about Dad. That's not fair. Emma's voice had acquired an edge, now, the sharp tone she used when she felt cornered. Brad's parents aren't attacking you personally. They're talking about policy, national priorities. You don't have to take everything as a personal insult. Sarah closed her eyes and counted to 5, a technique she'd learned for managing stress during high-pressure situations. When she opened them, her reflection in the window showed a woman who looked older than she had that morning, as if the conversation was aging her in real time. You're right, Emma. Policy discussions shouldn't be personal. So let me ask you a policy question. When did our family's policy become prioritizing the comfort of people who've known you for 2 years over the woman who raised you for 26? The silence stretched long enough that Sarah wondered if the call had dropped. Then Emma's voice returned, smaller than before but still defensive. It's not like that, Mom. It's just one holiday. We can do something together another time, just the 3 of us, maybe the weekend after, or Christmas Eve, or something. I'm not cutting you out of our lives. Sarah felt a laugh bubble up from somewhere deep in her chest, not from humor but from the absurdity of being offered consolation prizes for her own family relationships. The weekend after Thanksgiving, Emma? Like a makeup game for something. More important? Don't be dramatic, Mom. It's just dinner. It's not like it's some huge family crisis. The word dramatic hit Sarah like a physical blow. The same dismissive term that Emma had been using for years whenever her mother expressed an opinion that didn't align with her daughter's increasingly narrow definition of acceptable behavior. Too dramatic when Sarah had objected to Emma's college boyfriend who'd called military service glorified welfare. Too dramatic when she'd pointed out that Brad's comments about military families carrying baggage showed a fundamental misunderstanding of service and sacrifice. Too dramatic whenever she'd tried to maintain space for her own identity in conversations that seemed designed to minimize everything she'd accomplished. Emma, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I spent 2 decades in service to this country, including combat deployments where I led soldiers in life and death situations. I raised you alone after your father died, working full-time while putting myself through college to advance my career so I could provide better opportunities for you. I've been nothing but supportive of your marriage, your career, your choices. Even when those choices seem designed to distance yourself from everything I represent. Sarah paused, choosing her next words with the precision she'd once applied to mission briefings where clarity could mean the difference between success and failure. But I will not accept being treated as an embarrassment to be managed. I will not smile politely while being excluded from family traditions I've hosted for 20 years. And I will not pretend that being offered a consolation dinner makes this arrangement acceptable. Emma's response came quickly, with the kind of defensive anger that Sarah recognized from her daughter's teenage years. Fine, Mom. You want to make this a big dramatic thing. That's your choice. I was trying to handle this maturely, trying to find a solution that worked for everyone. But if you can't see past your own hurt feelings to what's best for the family as a whole, then maybe it's better that you're not there. The phrase, "what's best for the family," landed like a slap, the ultimate dismissal wrapped in concern for the greater good. Sarah had heard similar language from commanders who'd made decisions that sacrificed individual soldiers for strategic objectives, but she'd never expected to hear it from her own daughter, applied to her own exclusion from family gatherings. Emma, when you say what's best for the family, which family are you referring to? Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you're talking about Brad's family, not ours. I'm talking about my family, Mom. My husband, my future, my life. Sometimes people have to make choices about priorities. The words hung in the air between them like smoke from an explosion, and Sarah realized that this conversation had just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Emma hadn't simply excluded her from Thanksgiving. She'd redefined family to exclude her entirely, relegated her to the status of extended relation, whose feelings could be sacrificed for the convenience of the people who mattered. I see, Sarah said quietly. Your family, your priorities. I think I understand the situation much more clearly now. Something in her tone must have registered with Emma, because her voice became uncertain for the first time in the conversation. Mom? What do you mean? Sarah looked down at the restaurant paperwork scattered across her dining room table, Giuseppe's carefully documented records of a business built through decades of hard work and sacrifice, a legacy that would soon become hers to protect and nurture. I mean that I've learned something important about priorities, Emma, about family loyalty, about the difference between people who support you and people who find you inconvenient. Mom, you're scaring me a little. You sound different. I am different, Sarah replied. I'm a woman who just realized that she's been trying to maintain a relationship with someone who's embarrassed by everything she represents. I'm a veteran who's been asked to apologize for her service so that other people can feel comfortable. I'm a mother who's been told that her presence at family gatherings is a problem to be solved rather than a tradition to be cherished. Emma's voice became smaller, less certain. I never said I was embarrassed by you. You didn't have to say it, Emma. You've been showing it for 2 years. The way you changed the subject when I mentioned my service. The way you introduced me to Brad's parents as my mom instead of my mom, the veteran. The way you've gradually reduced our interactions to scheduled phone calls and obligatory holiday visits. And now this. This is just one Thanksgiving, Mom. You're making it sound like I'm cutting you out of my life forever. Sarah walked back to the dining room table and picked up Giuseppe's business card, running her thumb over the phone number. He'd written on the back. In 18 days, she would own Bella Vista Restaurant. In 19 days, Emma's carefully planned Thanksgiving dinner would become considerably more complicated. Emma, I want you to enjoy your drama-free holiday with Brad's parents. I want you to have exactly the kind of Thanksgiving you've decided is best for your family. I hope it's everything you're hoping it will be. Mom, what does that mean? You're talking like something's changed. Sarah smiled, though Emma couldn't see it through the phone. It wasn't a warm smile or a bitter one, but something else, entirely. The expression of someone who'd just realized that she'd been playing a game with rules that only applied to her. Something has changed, Emma. I've remembered who I am, and I've decided to act accordingly. While Emma expected tears and apologies, Sarah opened her laptop and began drafting purchase agreements. The morning after their phone conversation, she sat at her kitchen table with coffee steaming beside her, and Giuseppe's financial records spread across the surface like intelligence briefings from her military days. The emotional storm she might have experienced in another lifetime had been replaced by something far more dangerous: the calm, methodical planning that had once kept her soldiers alive in hostile territory. Her attorney, Rebecca Chen, had responded to Sarah's early morning email with the kind of professional efficiency that came with 20 years of real estate law and a reputation for closing complex deals ahead of schedule. Rebecca's office occupied the second floor of a renovated brick building downtown, close enough to the courthouse for convenience and far enough from the tourist district to avoid the inflated rents that came with waterfront views. "Sarah, I've reviewed the preliminary documents Giuseppe sent over, and I have to say, this is moving faster than any restaurant acquisition I've handled." Rebecca pushed her wire-rimmed glasses up her nose and gestured toward the thick folder of paperwork that had materialized overnight through a combination of email, fax, and hand delivery. "Most commercial sales take 60 to 90 days minimum. You're talking about closing in 2 weeks. Sarah had known Rebecca for 5 years, ever since needing legal help with David's estate paperwork, but she'd never seen the attorney in full, professional mode. Rebecca moved through the documents with surgical precision, highlighting potential issues and explaining contingencies with the kind of detailed attention that justified her hourly rate. "The timeline is non-negotiable," Sarah replied. "Giuseppe understands the urgency and he's motivated to sell quickly. What do we need to make this happen?" Rebecca leaned back in her leather chair and studied Sarah with the careful attention of someone trying to solve a puzzle. "We need a complete inspection of all kitchen equipment, verification of health department certifications, review of existing vendor contracts, confirmation of liquor license transfer requirements, and about 50 other details that usually take weeks to coordinate. Plus, Giuseppe's attorney needs time to prepare all the transfer documents." She paused, tapping her pen against the legal pad where she'd been making notes. "Sarah, I have to ask, what's driving this timeline? Most people don't buy restaurants the way they buy groceries. This is a major investment with serious ongoing obligations." Sarah had anticipated this question from her attorney, just as she'd prepared for Giuseppe's curiosity about her motivations. But sitting in Rebecca's office, surrounded by law books and framed certificates that spoke of careful professional planning, the truth felt both simpler and more complex than she'd expected. "My daughter has decided that my presence at family gatherings is an inconvenience. She's excluded me from Thanksgiving dinner so she can host Brad's parents without having to manage my opinions about military policy or foreign affairs. She seems to think that 22 years of military service makes me too intense for polite company." Rebecca set down her pen and looked directly at Sarah, the kind of sustained eye contact that lawyers used when they needed to understand not just the facts but the emotional landscape underneath them. "And buying a restaurant is your response to being excluded from Thanksgiving?" "Buying the restaurant where they're having Thanksgiving dinner is my response," Sarah clarified. "Emma made reservations at Bella Vista for her perfect family gathering. She wanted to avoid the complications of having me in her home, so she chose a neutral location where she could control the guest list and the atmosphere." A slow smile spread across Rebecca's face, the expression of someone who'd just realized she was witnessing something far more interesting than a routine commercial transaction. "Sarah, that's either brilliant or completely insane, possibly both." "It's strategic," Sarah replied. "Emma has spent 2 years making it clear that she's embarrassed by her mother, the veteran. She wants me to quietly accept my reduced role in her life, to be grateful for whatever scraps of attention she's willing to offer. She's treating me like I'm some elderly relative to be managed rather than the woman who raised her and sacrificed my career advancement to provide her with stability." Rebecca began making notes again, but her attention had shifted from legal concerns to something that looked like tactical planning. "What exactly are you hoping to accomplish? Because if you're planning to use restaurant ownership to force your way into their dinner, that could backfire spectacularly." Sarah had spent hours considering exactly this question, running through scenarios and potential outcomes with the same systematic approach she'd used for mission planning in Afghanistan. The goal wasn't simply revenge, though she couldn't deny the satisfaction that came with imagining Emma's reaction when she discovered who now owned her carefully chosen neutral venue. I'm hoping to remind Emma that the woman she's decided to dismiss isn't as powerless as she assumed. I'm hoping to demonstrate that actions have consequences, that you can't treat people badly and expect them to remain conveniently invisible. And yes, I'm hoping to make her Thanksgiving dinner significantly more complicated than she planned. The nuclear option, Rebecca said, still smiling. I respect the commitment level, but Sarah, once you do this, there's no taking it back. Buying a restaurant to make a point about family relationships is going to change your relationship with Emma permanently, one way or another. Sarah thought about the phone call the night before, the casual way Emma had referred to my family, as if Sarah no longer qualified for inclusion. The years of gradually increasing distance, the subtle embarrassment, the slow erosion of respect and consideration. The relationship had already changed. Emma had made that decision unilaterally. Sarah was simply choosing to respond from a position of strength rather than accepting the diminished role her daughter had assigned her. Rebecca, the relationship already changed. Emma changed it when she decided that her mother's military service was something to be hidden rather than honored. She changed it when she started treating me like an obligation rather than family. She changed it when she excluded me from Thanksgiving and expected me to be grateful for the favor. Rebecca nodded slowly, the gesture of someone who understood exactly what kind of line had been crossed. All right then, let's buy you a restaurant, but we're going to do this properly, with every legal protection in place. If you're going to make this kind of statement, we're going to make sure it's bulletproof. The next 3 hours dissolved into a blur of contracts, contingency clauses, inspection schedules, and financial verification procedures. Rebecca worked with the focused intensity of someone who'd found a project worthy of her full attention, coordinating with Giuseppe's attorney, scheduling property inspections, and arranging for the kind of expedited processing that usually cost extra but guaranteed results. Sarah found herself swept along by the momentum of the transaction, signing documents and authorizing payments with the steady calm of someone who'd already made the fundamental decision and was now simply executing the details. The inspection was scheduled for the following Monday, the financial audit for Tuesday, and the final closing for November 14th, exactly 10 days before Thanksgiving. Giuseppe seems genuinely excited about this sale, Rebecca mentioned, as they reviewed the timeline one final time. His attorney says he's never seen him this eager to close a deal. He's apparently been telling the staff that the new owner is someone who understands the restaurant business and will maintain his standards. Sarah felt a flicker of something that might have been anxiety at the mention of the restaurant staff. Purchasing Bella Vista meant taking responsibility for 16 employees, from the sous chef who'd worked with Giuseppe for 8 years, to the hostess who was putting herself through college with her evening shifts. These were real people with rent payments and car loans and families of their own, not just numbers on a balance sheet. I want to meet with the key staff before closing, she said. The kitchen manager, the front-of-house supervisor, whoever Giuseppe considers essential to daily operations. If they're comfortable with the transition, they keep their jobs. If they want to leave, they get 2 weeks severance and positive references. Rebecca added this to her growing list of pre-closing requirements. Giuseppe will appreciate that. He's been worried about his people, especially the ones who've been with him longest. A lot of restaurant sales result in complete staff turnover, and he's invested years in training his team. As Sarah drove home from Rebecca's office, she felt the weight of what she'd set in motion settling around her like armor she'd forgotten she knew how to wear. The comfortable suburban streets looked different now, as if she was seeing them through the eyes of someone who'd just stepped back into a larger version of herself. She was no longer just Sarah Martinez, excluded mother and dismissed veteran. She was Sarah Martinez, restaurant owner and tactical strategist, someone who responded to challenges with action rather than acceptance. Her phone buzzed with a text message as she pulled into her driveway. Emma's name appeared on the screen with a message that felt like an afterthought. "Mom, I hope you're not upset about our conversation last night. I really think this will be better for everyone. Maybe we can do lunch the week after Thanksgiving? Love you." Sarah stared at the message for a long moment, noting the casual assumption that she would simply accept the new arrangement, that a lunch invitation could compensate for exclusion from family traditions. The phrase, "better for everyone," was particularly galling, as if Emma had appointed herself the arbiter of what constituted the greater good for relationships she was systematically dismantling. Instead of responding immediately, Sarah walked into her house and opened her laptop to the folder she'd created for restaurant-related documents. Giuseppe had sent her the staff schedule for Thanksgiving week, including the reservations list that showed Emma's party scheduled for 6 o'clock on Thursday evening. Table 12, which Giuseppe had noted in his email, was positioned near the E. Windows with a view of the garden, his best table for special occasions. Sarah opened a new document and began typing a response to Emma's text, but instead of sending it immediately, she saved it as a draft. There would be time for family communication later, after the legal documents were signed and the ownership transfer was complete. For now, she had a restaurant to learn how to run, and staff to meet, and a business plan to develop for an operation that would need to generate revenue from the first day she owned it. The afternoon dissolved into research and planning, interrupted only by phone calls from Rebecca, with updates on inspection schedules, and Giuseppe with questions about equipment, preferences, and vendor relationships. By evening, Sarah's dining room table had transformed into a command center, with architectural drawings of the restaurant layout, staff schedules, vendor contracts, and financial projections arranged in organized stacks that would have made her old commanding officer proud. She made herself a simple dinner and ate it while reviewing the wine list that came with Bella Vista's liquor license, noting the expensive bottles that Emma would probably order to impress Brad's parents. The irony wasn't lost on her that she would soon be profiting from her daughter's attempts to create the perfect family gathering that specifically excluded her. As she prepared for bed, Sarah's phone buzzed with another message, this time from Martha at the book club. "Sarah, honey, you missed our Thursday meeting. Everyone was asking about you. Hope everything's all right. Call me when you get a chance." Sarah realized she'd completely forgotten about book club in the intensity of her restaurant planning. The first time in 3 years she'd missed a meeting without calling ahead. She typed back a quick apology and promised to call Martha the next day with an explanation. Some conversations, she reflected, were going to require more preparation than others. 10 days until closing. 11 days until she became a restaurant owner. 12 days until Emma discovered that her carefully planned family gathering had just become considerably more complicated. Sarah turned off the lights and headed upstairs, feeling for the first time in months that she was moving toward something rather than simply enduring whatever came next. The pattern emerged slowly, like developing film in a dark room, revealing details that had been invisible until Sarah knew where to look. It wasn't just the Thanksgiving exclusion, she realized as she sat in Giuseppe's office 3 days after their initial meeting, reviewing the restaurant's reservation records and staff schedules. Emma's rejection was part of a larger tapestry, of dismissal and distance that had been weaving itself through their relationship for the better part of 2 years, thread by careful thread. Giuseppe had given her complete access to the restaurant's operational records, partly as due diligence for the sale, and partly because he seemed genuinely invested in ensuring a smooth transition for his staff and customers. The reservation system showed a detailed history of bookings, cancellations, and special requests that painted a picture of how the restaurant functioned during peak seasons and quiet periods. "Your daughter's party has been planning this reservation for quite some time," Giuseppe mentioned, scrolling through the digital records on his office computer. "She called in August to book the table, mentioned it was for a special family Thanksgiving with her husband's parents visiting from out of state. She was very specific about wanting table 12, our best spot for intimate family gatherings. Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach as she processed the timeline. August. Emma had been planning her parents' excluded Thanksgiving dinner for 3 months, long before their phone conversation, long before the careful explanation about Brad's parents needing a drama-free environment. This hadn't been a recent decision prompted by immediate concerns about family dynamics. It had been a premeditated choice to exclude her mother from holiday traditions. Did she mention any special requirements, dietary restrictions, wine preferences, anything that might indicate the scope of what she was planning? Sarah kept her voice neutral, but Giuseppe must have heard something in her tone because he looked up from the screen with the expression of someone who'd just realized he was witnessing a family drama unfold in real time. She asked specifically about our private dining options, whether Table 12 could be reserved for the entire evening so they wouldn't be disturbed by other guests. She wanted to know about our wine selection, our dessert menu, whether we could accommodate any special requests for the evening. He paused, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Mrs. Martinez, I hope you understand that I share this information only because you're purchasing the restaurant. Normally, customer privacy would prevent me from discussing reservation details. Sarah waved away his concern with the gesture of someone who had larger problems to consider than restaurant etiquette. Giuseppe, in 10 days I'll own this establishment and these will be my customers to serve. I need to understand what kind of expectations have been set so I can ensure they're met appropriately. But privately, she felt each detail like a separate blow. Emma had researched private dining options to ensure complete separation from other guests. She'd inquired about wine selections to impress Brad's parents with her sophisticated choices. She'd asked about special accommodations to make the evening memorable and perfect. Every element of planning had been designed to create the ideal family gathering, with one crucial exception: the family member who'd actually created and maintained the tradition of Thanksgiving dinners for the past 20 years. Giuseppe printed out the reservation details and handed them to Sarah, his expression carefully neutral. 6 guests, arriving at 6 p.m., requested wine pairings with dinner, asked about our seasonal menu specialties. She mentioned that this would be their first Thanksgiving dinner at a restaurant, that they usually did family gatherings at home but wanted to try something different this year. Something different. Sarah almost laughed at the euphemism. Emma had told Giuseppe that they wanted to try something different, not that they were excluding a family member who might complicate the evening with her inconvenient opinions about military service and foreign policy. The reservation had been presented as an adventurous choice rather than a calculated exclusion. Giuseppe, I'd like to review your staffing schedule for Thanksgiving week. If I'm taking over operations, I need to understand how you handle your busiest service periods. Sarah was already thinking beyond the immediate situation, recognizing that owning a restaurant meant responsibility for successful service regardless of personal drama. But she also wanted to understand exactly who would be working on Thursday evening, who would witness whatever confrontation or resolution was coming. The staffing schedule revealed the careful orchestration required for holiday service. Giuseppe would have his full team working: Marcus, the head chef who'd been with him for 8 years, Isabella, the front-of-house manager who coordinated reservations and handled VIP guests, James, the sommelier who managed wine service and pairings, and 6 additional servers, 2 hostesses, and 3 kitchen staff to handle the increased volume of holiday diners. Thanksgiving is our second busiest day of the year after New Year's Eve, Giuseppe explained. We serve nearly 200 covers, mostly families and couples who want to celebrate without cooking at home. It requires precise coordination and experienced staff. Everyone on this schedule has worked multiple holiday services. Sarah studied the names and positions, realizing that she would inherit not just a restaurant, but a team of professionals who'd developed their own rhythms and relationships over years of working together. These people didn't know about her family situation, didn't understand that their new owner had purchased their workplace partly to demonstrate a point about family loyalty and respect. To them, She would simply be the person responsible for their paychecks and working conditions. "I'd like to meet with your key staff before the closing," she said. "Not to make changes or evaluate performance, but to introduce myself and understand how they prefer to work. If this transition is going to be successful, I need their expertise and cooperation." Giuseppe nodded approvingly. "I'll arrange meetings with Marcus and Isabella this week. They can brief you on holiday service protocols and introduce you to the rest of the team." "They're good people, Mrs. Martinez. They care about this place and they work hard to maintain our reputation." As Sarah drove home from the restaurant, she found herself thinking about patterns and systems, the way individual decisions accumulated into larger structures of behavior and expectation. Emma's Thanksgiving exclusion wasn't an isolated incident, but the culmination of months of gradual distancing, each step small enough to be dismissed individually, but collectively representing a fundamental shift in how her daughter viewed their relationship. The phone calls had become less frequent over the past year, shifting from weekly conversations to bi-weekly check-ins to monthly obligation calls that felt more like status reports than genuine connection. Emma's visits home had grown shorter and more formal, weekend trips compressed into overnight stays that barely allowed time for meaningful conversation. Even their shared activities had been streamlined to accommodate Emma's busy schedule and Brad's preferences, book clubs and museum visits replaced by quick lunches at chain restaurants where conversation could be kept light and non-controversial. Sarah realized she'd been enabling the pattern by accepting each reduction in contact, each canceled plan, each subtle sign that her presence in Emma's life was becoming optional rather than essential. She'd told herself that adult children naturally grew more independent, that marriage required adjustments in family relationships, that Emma's increasing distance was normal developmental behavior rather than deliberate rejection. But the August reservation told a different story. Emma hadn't gradually drifted away from family traditions. She'd actively planned to exclude her mother from them while simultaneously creating new traditions that centered on impressing Brad's parents. The Thanksgiving dinner at Bella Vista wasn't an impulsive decision or a response to immediate conflict. It was a calculated choice to replace her mother's role in family celebrations with something more socially acceptable to her new in-laws. Sarah parked in her driveway and sat in the car for a moment, watching neighbors return from work and prepare for their own evening routines. Normal families with normal problems, she thought again, not daughters who spent months planning elaborate ways to exclude their mothers from holiday gatherings. But then she corrected herself. Maybe this was more normal than she wanted to admit. Maybe adult children regularly decided that their parents' values and perspectives were embarrassments to be managed rather than differences to be respected. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Rebecca. "Inspection scheduled for Monday at 10 a.m. Giuseppe's attorney has prepared all transfer documents. Still on track for November 14th closing. How are you feeling about this?" Sarah stared at the question for a moment, surprised to realize she wasn't entirely sure how she felt. Determined, certainly. Focused on executing a plan that would demonstrate Emma's miscalculation about her mother's character and capabilities. But underneath the tactical satisfaction, something else stirred that felt less comfortable, a recognition that she was about to cross a line that would change her relationship with her daughter permanently. She typed back, "Ready to proceed. See you Monday morning." Inside her house, Sarah opened her laptop and navigated to the folder of restaurant documents that had been growing larger each day. Giuseppe had sent her copies of vendor contracts, staff employment records, health department, inspection reports, and financial statements that told the story of a business built through careful attention to detail and consistent quality. She would inherit all of it in 10 days. The relationships with local suppliers, the reputation with regular customers, the responsibilities to employees who depended on the restaurant for their livelihoods. The weight of actual restaurant ownership was beginning to feel more real than the symbolic victory over Emma's dismissive treatment. Sarah would need to learn about food costs and labor scheduling, wine inventory and equipment maintenance, customer service standards and health code compliance. She would need to work with Marcus to understand seasonal menu planning and with Isabella to coordinate special events and private parties. She would need to become, quite literally, a restaurant owner rather than simply a mother making a point about family respect. Her phone rang, interrupting her review of vendor contracts. Martha's name appeared on the screen, and Sarah realized she'd forgotten to call back about missing book club. "Sarah, honey, I've been worried about you. You never miss our meetings. Without calling, and when I tried to reach you yesterday, your phone went straight to voicemail. Is everything all right?" Sarah found herself smiling at Martha's genuine concern, the kind of straightforward care that had become increasingly rare in her interactions with Emma. "I'm fine, Martha. Actually, I'm more than fine. I'm in the middle of making some fairly significant changes in my life." "Changes? What kind of changes? You're not moving away, are you? Because I don't know what I'd do without you in book club. You're the only one who actually reads the military history selections." "I'm not moving away. I'm buying a restaurant." The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that Sarah wondered if the call had dropped. Then Martha's voice returned, higher pitched than usual. "You're buying a what? Sarah? Honey? Did you just say you're buying a restaurant?" "Bella Vista, actually. The place downtown in the old Victorian mansion. Giuseppe Torino is retiring and I'm purchasing the business. The closing is scheduled for next week." Another silence, followed by what sounded like Martha sitting down heavily in a chair. "Sarah Martinez, in all the years I've known you, you have never mentioned any interest in the restaurant business. What in the world has gotten into you?" Sarah looked around her living room, taking in the family photos that documented Emma's progression from gap-toothed elementary school student to polished young professional, the military commendations framed discreetly on one wall, the comfortable furniture that had hosted countless book club meetings and holiday gatherings. Soon she would add restaurant ownership to the list of identities that defined her life. "Emma excluded me from Thanksgiving dinner this year, Martha. She made reservations at Bella Vista so she could host Brad's parents without having to deal with her embarrassing mother and her inconvenient opinions about military policy. She's been planning this for months." Martha's response was immediate and fierce. "That little witch, Sarah. I am so sorry. How could she do that to you? After everything you've sacrificed for that girl." The loyalty in Martha's voice was both comforting and revealing. It reminded Sarah that Emma's behavior wasn't normal or acceptable. People recognized the cruelty of excluding a parent from family celebrations. It also highlighted how isolated she'd become in trying to manage her deteriorating relationship with her daughter, accepting treatment that friends would immediately recognize as unacceptable. "So, you're buying the restaurant to..." Martha's voice trailed off as she worked through the implications. "I'm buying the restaurant to remind Emma that the woman she's decided to dismiss isn't as powerless as she assumed," Sarah replied. "And also because I think I might actually enjoy running a business where my experience and judgment are valued rather than treated as embarrassments to be managed." Martha laughed, a sound of pure delight. "Sarah Martinez, you magnificent woman. Emma has no idea what's about to hit her, does she?" "Not yet," Sarah said. "But she will." So Sarah started building her arsenal while Emma planned her perfect family dinner. The morning after her conversation with Martha, Sarah arrived at Bella Vista at 8 a.m. for her first operational immersion, carrying a leather portfolio that had once held mission briefings and now contained restaurant management guides, financial projections, and a detailed timeline for taking over a business in less than a week. Giuseppe met her at the staff entrance, already dressed in his chef's coat despite the early hour, his hair damp from what was clearly a rushed shower. The kitchen was alive with the controlled chaos of morning prep work, 3 cooks moving through their routines with the efficient choreography that came from years of working together. The air smelled of fresh herbs, roasting vegetables, and the industrial-strength coffee that kept restaurant workers functioning through 16-hour days. Mrs. Martinez, welcome to the real Bella Vista, Giuseppe said, gesturing toward the organized mayhem surrounding them. What you saw the other day was the front of house, the performance we create for customers. This is where the actual work happens, where we make decisions that determine whether we succeed or fail every single day. Sarah followed him through the kitchen, noting the commercial equipment that would soon be her responsibility. 2 massive gas ranges with 8 burners each, 3 convection ovens, a wood-fired pizza oven that Giuseppe had imported from Italy, walk-in coolers that hummed with the steady reliability of life support systems. Everything was spotlessly clean and precisely organized, the kind of operational discipline that reminded her of military logistics centers where efficiency wasn't optional, but mandatory for mission success. Marcus Caldwell, the head chef, looked up from the prep station where he was breaking down whole chickens with the kind of knife work that spoke of decades in professional kitchens. He was younger than Sarah had expected, maybe 45, with the lean build and quick movements of someone who'd spent his career on his feet in high-pressure environments. His handshake was firm but brief, the greeting of someone who measured people by their actions rather than their introductions. "Giuseppe tells me you're military," Marcus said, wiping his hands on his apron. "Army?" 22 years, 2 combat, deployments in Afghanistan, logistics and personnel management. Sarah met his direct gaze without flinching. "I understand supply chains, inventory control, and managing people under pressure. I don't know the restaurant business specifically, but I understand operational discipline." Marcus nodded approvingly. "Good. Because restaurant work isn't about cooking pretty food, it's about executing the same standards consistently, shift after shift, regardless of how tired you are or how difficult the customers get. It's about systems and discipline and never accepting good enough when lives depend on quality." Sarah felt something click into place, the recognition of shared professional values that transcended industry differences. Marcus understood that running a kitchen was like commanding a unit, that success required clear communication, mutual trust, and absolute commitment to standards that couldn't be compromised for convenience. "What do you need me to know before I take over operations?" she asked. For the next 3 hours, Marcus walked her through every aspect of kitchen management, from vendor relationships and food cost calculations to staff scheduling and health. Department compliance. He showed her the walk-in coolers where thousands of dollars worth of ingredients were stored according to strict rotation protocols, the prep stations where consistency was maintained through precise portioning and timing, the service line where orders came together under the pressure of customers waiting at tables. "Thanksgiving week is our stress test," Marcus explained as they reviewed the holiday menu that would serve nearly 200 guests. "Everyone wants turkey and traditional sides, but they also want restaurant quality and presentation. We prep for 3 days straight, work 18-hour shifts on Thursday, and pray that nothing breaks down or runs out. It's controlled chaos at its finest." Sarah studied the prep lists and cooking schedules, recognizing the military-level planning required to coordinate multiple dishes for simultaneous service. Turkey breasts would be brined for 48 hours. Side dishes prepared in batches large enough to serve the expected volume. Desserts made 3 days in advance to ensure consistent quality. The operation required the kind of advance planning and systematic execution that she'd used for managing supply convoys in hostile territory. "Giuseppe mentioned that you have a family reservation on Thursday evening," Marcus said, his tone carefully neutral. "Table 12, 6 guests. Is there anything special we should know about serving your family?" Sarah felt the familiar weight of explaining a situation that defied normal family dynamics, but Marcus's professional demeanor made it easier to stick to operational facts rather than emotional complexity. "The reservation was made by my daughter, who's excluded me from this family gathering. She doesn't know I'm purchasing the restaurant. Thursday evening is likely to be complicated from a customer service perspective." Marcus studied her for a moment, his expression shifting from professional courtesy to something that looked like tactical assessment. "Complicated how?" Are we talking about a family argument that might disturb other diners, or something that could affect our ability to provide normal service? I'm not planning to create a scene or disrupt your kitchen operations, Sarah replied, but my daughter is expecting a perfect family dinner with her husband's parents, and discovering that her excluded mother now owns the restaurant is going to change the dynamic considerably. Your staff should be prepared for some tension at table 12. A slow smile spread across Marcus's face, the expression of someone who just realized he was about to witness something far more interesting than routine holiday service. Mrs. Martinez, I've worked in restaurants for 25 years. I've seen family drama, business disputes, marriage proposals gone wrong, and celebrities having public meltdowns. If you can handle combat logistics, you can handle one uncomfortable family dinner. Isabella Rodriguez, the front-of-house manager, joined them for the final hour of Sarah's orientation, bringing with her the reservation book and seating charts that would govern Thursday evening's service. She was younger than Marcus, but carried herself with the poised confidence of someone who'd learned to manage difficult customers and complicated requests without breaking stride. Your daughter's party specifically requested privacy and minimal interruption, Isabella mentioned, reviewing the notes attached to the reservation. They want wine pairings with dinner, our full seasonal menu, and what she called an elegant family experience. She emphasized that this was important for making a good impression on visiting relatives. Sarah felt each detail like a separate confirmation of Emma's elaborate planning to exclude her, while simultaneously creating the perfect family gathering for people who'd known Emma for less than 2 years. The wine pairings, the seasonal menu, the emphasis on elegance and impression management, all of it designed to showcase Emma as a sophisticated hostess, capable of providing the kind of refined experience that Brad's parents would find impressive. Isabella, I need you to understand that Thursday evening service at table 12 is going to require exceptional diplomatic skills, Sarah said. My relationship with my daughter is complicated, and she's not expecting to see me at all, much less as the owner of the restaurant where she's hosting what she considers her perfect family dinner. Isabella's eyebrows rose slightly, but her expression remained professionally neutral. Are you planning to interact with the table during service, or do you want us to handle everything normally while you observe from a distance? Sarah had been considering exactly this question for days, running through scenarios and potential approaches with the same systematic analysis she'd applied to tactical planning in Afghanistan. The nuclear option would be to confront Emma directly, to appear at table 12 and announce her new ownership in front of Brad's parents. The passive option would be to remain invisible, letting Emma enjoy her dinner while knowing that her excluded mother was profiting from every bottle of wine they ordered. I want to provide excellent service to all our guests, including the party at table 12, Sarah said finally. But I also want them to understand that the woman they've dismissed as irrelevant is actually the person responsible for the quality of their dining experience. I'll make that clear through professional interaction rather than personal confrontation. Isabella nodded slowly, the gesture of someone who understood exactly what kind of performance would be required. Understood. We'll provide our standard exceptional service while making it clear that you're personally ensuring the quality of their evening. Giuseppe had been listening to these conversations with growing delight, his expression shifting from professional courtesy to something approaching entertainment. Mrs. Martinez, I believe you are going to bring a very interesting energy to this establishment. My customers have never had an owner with your particular background and motivational structure. As Sarah prepared to leave Bella Vista that afternoon, her portfolio now filled with kitchen schedules, vendor contacts, and staff information, she felt the satisfaction of successful reconnaissance. She understood the operational requirements of her new business, had established working relationships with key staff members, and confirmed that her team was both capable and willing to help execute whatever Thursday evening would bring. Her phone buzzed with a text message as she reached her car. Emma's name appeared on the screen with a message that felt like salt in a wound that had been carefully cleaned and bandaged. Mom, Just wanted to let you know we're really excited about our Thanksgiving dinner at this amazing restaurant. It's going to be so nice to have someone else do all the cooking and cleaning for once. Hope you're planning something fun for yourself. Love you. Sarah stared at the message for a long moment, noting the casual assumption that she would need to plan something to fill the void left by her exclusion from family celebrations. Emma's excitement about having someone else handle the cooking and cleaning was particularly galling, given that Sarah had been the someone handling those responsibilities for 20 years of family Thanksgivings. Instead of responding immediately, Sarah opened her notepad app and began making a list of final preparations for restaurant ownership. Staff schedules to review, vendor deliveries to coordinate, inventory systems to learn, and customer service protocols to master. In 4 days, she would own Bella Vista. In 5 days, she would be responsible for providing Emma's perfect family dinner while demonstrating that the woman Emma had dismissed was far more capable and resourceful than her daughter had assumed. She typed a brief response to Emma's text. "I'm sure your dinner will be exactly what you're hoping for. Enjoy the experience." Then she drove home to continue her preparation for becoming the kind of restaurant owner who understood that sometimes the best service came with a lesson about respecting the people who made your comfort possible. The research phase was nearly complete. Soon it would be time for the operational phase, where all her planning would be tested against the reality of family dynamics, professional responsibilities, and the question of whether owning a restaurant was an effective way to demonstrate that dismissing a veteran was a serious miscalculation. 4 more days until closing. 5 more days until Emma discovered that her carefully planned family gathering had just become significantly more complex than she'd anticipated. That's when Sarah found her smoking gun. The discovery came not through dramatic investigation or careful surveillance, but through the mundane process of reviewing the restaurant's customer database while learning Bella Vista's reservation management system. Isabella had given her administrative access to help her understand how bookings were coordinated, cancellation policies were enforced, and VIP preferences were tracked across multiple visits. Sarah was sitting in Giuseppe's soon-to-be former office on Tuesday morning, 2 days before closing, scrolling through customer records while drinking coffee that Marcus had insisted she try from their new Ethiopian blend. The database contained 5 years of reservation history, special requests, dietary restrictions, and notes about customer preferences that helped the staff provide personalized service to regular guests. Emma's profile appeared as Sinclair, Emma, party planning, special occasions, with a detailed history that made Sarah's stomach clench with recognition. The first entry dated back 18 months, a dinner reservation for 4 people with a note requesting quiet table for family discussion. That had been the dinner where Emma had announced her engagement to Brad, Sarah remembered, the evening, when her daughter had seemed nervous and distracted throughout the meal. But it was the subsequent entries that revealed the pattern Sarah hadn't recognized at the time. Emma had become a regular customer at Bella Vista, booking tables for various occasions that never included her mother. Birthday celebrations with Brad's colleagues, anniversary dinners with Brad's parents when they visited, networking events with Brad's business associates. A steady progression of social occasions that positioned Emma as a sophisticated hostess while systematically excluding the woman who had taught her everything she knew about entertaining guests. The reservation notes painted a picture of increasing confidence and specific demands. Wants table 12 for intimate family gathering. Prefers Pinot Noir recommendations, nothing too bold. Appreciates discreet service, minimal interruption. Important impression management evening. Each entry showed Emma's growing comfort with using Bella Vista as her preferred venue for occasions where she wanted to project a particular image of herself. Most damning was a note from 3 months ago, attached to a reservation for Emma and Brad's second wedding anniversary. Customer mentioned wanting to establish this as their place for special family occasions. Prefers our seasonal tasting menu. Note: very particular about wine service presentation. Wants to impress family members who don't usually do fine dining. Sarah stared at that entry for a long time, recognizing the implicit reference to herself. As the family member who didn't usually do fine dining, Emma had been describing her mother to restaurant staff as someone unsophisticated, someone who needed to be managed and accommodated rather than respected and included. The casual dismissal was worse than outright criticism because it revealed Emma's fundamental assumption that her mother wasn't worth considering as an equal participant in family celebrations. Isabella knocked on the office door, interrupting Sarah's review of her daughter's customer history. "Mrs. Martinez, I wanted to confirm the final details for Thursday's service. Giuseppe said you'd like to personally oversee the evening, and I want to make sure our staff understands the protocols." Sarah minimized the customer database and gestured for Isabella to sit down, recognizing that this conversation would require the kind of careful coordination that had once governed complex military operations. "Isabella, I need you to understand exactly what we're dealing with on Thursday evening. My daughter has been using this restaurant for over a year as her preferred venue for social occasions that specifically exclude me. She's told your staff that I'm the kind of person who doesn't usually do fine dining, someone who might embarrass her in front of the people she's trying to impress." Isabella's expression shifted from professional courtesy to something that looked like genuine anger. "She said that about you? Mrs. Martinez, you're one of the most polished customers I've ever worked with. Your questions about our operations show more understanding of hospitality than most people in the industry demonstrate." "The point isn't whether her assessment is accurate," Sarah replied. "The point is that she's been systematically excluding me from family celebrations while simultaneously building a relationship with this establishment that positions her as a sophisticated regular customer. She's been using Bella Vista to create a version of herself that doesn't include her military mother." Isabella pulled out her tablet and began making notes with the focused attention of someone preparing for a complex service challenge. "How do you want us to handle Thursday evening? Standard service protocols? Or something that makes your ownership more apparent?" Sarah had been considering this question for days, balancing her desire for vindication against her responsibility to provide excellent service to all customers, including the daughter who had excluded her. The goal wasn't to humiliate Emma, but to demonstrate that the woman she'd dismissed was far more capable and resourceful than she'd assumed. "I want you to provide exceptional service to Table 12. Exactly the kind of sophisticated experience Emma expects when she brings important guests to her place," Sarah said. "But I want it to be clear that I'm personally ensuring the quality of their evening. Not as Emma's mother, but as the owner of the establishment they've chosen for their family celebration." Isabella nodded slowly, understanding the distinction. Professional interaction rather than personal confrontation. Demonstrate competence and authority rather than emotional response. Exactly. Emma wanted a drama-free holiday with people she considers more sophisticated than her military mother. I'm going to give her exactly that, while making it clear that her mother is the person responsible for creating the elegant experience she's paying for. Isabella made more notes, then looked up with a slight smile. "Mrs. Martinez, I have to say, this is the most interesting customer service challenge I've encountered in 10 years of restaurant management. Your daughter has no idea what kind of evening she's actually reserved." Sarah opened the customer database again and showed Isabella the progression of Emma's reservations, the increasing frequency and specificity of her requests, the growing comfort with treating Bella Vista as her personal entertaining venue. "She's been building a relationship with this place that specifically excludes me. She's told your staff that I'm unsophisticated, that I don't understand fine dining, that I might be embarrassing in front of her important guests. And now you own the place," Isabella said, her smile widening. "Mrs. Martinez, I think Thursday evening is going to be very educational for everyone involved." The afternoon dissolved into detailed planning for Thanksgiving service, with Marcus joining them to coordinate kitchen operations with front-of-house protocols. Sarah found herself energized by the complexity of restaurant management, the way multiple systems had to function simultaneously to create a seamless customer experience. It was similar to military logistics, but with higher stakes for customer satisfaction and immediate feedback on performance quality. Marcus had prepared a special tasting menu for Sarah to sample, explaining each dish that would be served on Thursday, while noting the preparation time, ingredient costs, and presentation standards that defined Bella Vista's reputation. The food was exceptional, the kind of careful preparation and artistic presentation that justified the prices Emma was paying to impress Brad's parents. "Your daughter has good taste in restaurants," Marcus said as Sarah sampled the herb-crusted turkey breast that would anchor Thursday's seasonal menu. "She's been very specific about wanting our best dishes, our finest wine pairings, our most attentive service. She clearly understands quality." Sarah felt the irony of Marcus's comment settle in her chest like a weight. Emma understood quality well enough to seek it out for her own entertainment needs, but she'd decided that her mother wasn't sophisticated enough to appreciate or contribute to that quality. She wanted fine dining for herself and Brad's parents, while assuming that her military mother would be out of place in such refined surroundings. "Marcus, I want you to prepare Thursday's menu as if you were cooking for the most important critics in the industry," Sarah said. "Emma has told people that this restaurant is her place for special occasions. I want her to understand exactly what kind of establishment she's claimed ownership of, and exactly who's responsible for maintaining its standards." Marcus grinned, the expression of someone who'd just been challenged to demonstrate his professional capabilities. "Mrs. Martinez, your daughter's party is going to receive the finest Thanksgiving dinner we've ever served. Every dish will be perfect. Every presentation will be flawless, and every element of service will demonstrate exactly why Bella Vista has the reputation it does." Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message as she and Marcus finished reviewing Thursday's menu. Rebecca's name appeared with an update that felt like the final piece of a complex puzzle clicking into place. "All documents ready for tomorrow's closing. Giuseppe's attorney confirms everything is in order. You'll officially own Bella Vista as of 2 p.m. Wednesday. Are you ready for this?" Sarah looked around Giuseppe's office, soon to be her office, taking in the framed photographs of successful dinner services, positive restaurant reviews, and staff celebrations that documented years of building something substantial from careful attention to detail and consistent quality. In 24 hours, all of this would be her responsibility. The reputation, the staff, the customers, and the complex challenge of running a business while navigating family drama. She typed back to Rebecca, "More than ready. See you tomorrow afternoon." Isabella had been watching Sarah's expression during the text exchange, and something in her face must have revealed the weight of what was about to happen. "Mrs. Martinez, are you having second thoughts about any of this? Because once you sign those papers tomorrow, there's no taking back what happens on Thursday evening." Sarah thought about Emma's customer profile, the 18 months of reservations that excluded her mother while building a relationship with the restaurant that Emma had claimed as her own. She thought about the casual dismissal embedded in staff notes, the assumption that her mother wasn't sophisticated enough for fine dining, the systematic exclusion from family celebrations that had been planned months in advance. "Isabella, my daughter spent over a year establishing herself as a valued customer at this restaurant while telling your staff that her mother wasn't the kind of person who belonged in establishments like this. She's been using Bella Vista to create a version of herself that doesn't include the woman who raised her, and sacrificed her military career to provide Emma with every opportunity she's enjoyed." Sarah paused, choosing her words with the precision she'd once applied to operational briefings where clarity could determine mission success. "Tomorrow, I become the owner of the restaurant she's claimed as her place. Thursday evening, she'll discover that the woman she's dismissed as unsophisticated is actually the person responsible for creating and maintaining the elegant experience she's paying premium prices to enjoy." Isabella nodded slowly, understanding both the personal motivation and the professional implications. "And we're going to make sure that experience is absolutely perfect, aren't we?" "We're going to make sure it's exactly what she ordered," Sarah replied. "Sophisticated, elegant, memorable, and entirely under the control of the woman she's spent 18 months excluding from her life. 24 hours until closing. 48 hours until Emma discovered that her carefully curated social venue had just become considerably more complicated than she'd ever imagined. The smoking gun wasn't a single dramatic revelation, but a pattern of systematic exclusion documented in reservation records and customer notes. Emma hadn't simply decided to exclude her mother from one holiday dinner. She'd been building an alternative social identity that specifically required her mother's absence to function properly. Thursday evening was going to be very educational indeed. Sarah didn't act immediately. Instead, she positioned herself strategically. The closing took place on Wednesday afternoon in Rebecca's conference room, with Giuseppe looking genuinely emotional as he signed the final transfer documents that ended 20 years of restaurant ownership. He handed Sarah the keys to Bella Vista with the kind of ceremonial weight that acknowledged she was inheriting not just a business, but a legacy built through decades of careful attention to quality and community service. Mrs. Martinez, I have never sold a business to someone I trusted more completely, Giuseppe said as they shook hands for the final time as seller and buyer. You understand what this place represents, and you have the strength to maintain what I've built while making it your own? Sarah felt the weight of actual ownership settle around her shoulders like a mantle she'd forgotten she knew how to wear. The restaurant was hers now. The Victorian mansion with its carefully restored architectural details, the commercial kitchen with its professional-grade equipment, the wine cellar Giuseppe had spent years stocking with bottles that complemented his seasonal menus, and most importantly, the reputation for excellence that would either flourish or deteriorate based on her decisions as owner. Rebecca had prepared a comprehensive transition binder that contained everything from insurance, policies and equipment warranties to vendor contracts and staff employment records. The legal complexity of restaurant ownership was staggering, Sarah realized as she reviewed document after document that defined her new responsibilities to employees, customers, suppliers, and regulatory agencies. Sarah, I have to ask one more time, Rebecca said as they finalized the paperwork. Are you absolutely certain about your timeline for tomorrow evening? Because once Emma discovers you own the restaurant where she's hosting her family dinner, there's no controlling how that situation develops. Sarah looked through the conference room windows at the late afternoon light filtering through downtown buildings, thinking about the progression of events that had brought her to this moment. Emma's casual dismissal, the months of planning her parents' excluded Thanksgiving, the customer profile that revealed systematic exclusion disguised as social sophistication, and now the reality of owning the establishment her daughter had claimed as her personal entertaining venue. Rebecca, I've been thinking about this for 2 weeks. Emma made a calculated decision to exclude me from family celebrations while simultaneously using my exclusion to build relationships with people she considers more sophisticated than her military mother. She's been telling restaurant staff that I'm the kind of person who doesn't belong in establishments like Bella Vista, while positioning herself as a valued regular customer. Sarah paused, organizing her thoughts with the precision she'd learned through years of military briefings. Tomorrow evening, she's going to discover that the woman she's dismissed as unsophisticated actually owns the restaurant where she's trying to impress Brad's parents. That revelation is going to be uncomfortable for everyone involved, but it's also going to be educational. Rebecca nodded slowly, recognizing the determination that had carried Sarah through military service and was now driving her approach to family conflict resolution. All right then, you officially own a restaurant. Try not to get yourself arrested for disturbing the peace tomorrow evening. Sarah drove directly from Rebecca's office to Bella Vista, using her new keys for the first time to enter through the staff entrance. The restaurant was closed to customers on Wednesday evening, but Marcus and Isabella were there preparing for Thursday's holiday service, their movements efficient and purposeful as they coordinated the final details of what would be Sarah's first day as a restaurant owner. The kitchen hummed with controlled activity as prep cooks completed advanced preparation for Thursday's menu. Turkey breasts were brining in large containers, Side dishes were being prepared in quantities large enough to serve 200 guests, and desserts were cooling in the walk-in coolers after 3 days of careful preparation. The operation reminded Sarah of military logistical centers during deployment preparation, the same attention to detail and systematic execution that ensured mission success under pressure. "Mrs. Martinez, welcome to your restaurant," Marcus said, looking up from the prep station where he was reviewing final cooking schedules. "How does it feel to own a place like this?" Sarah walked through the kitchen, noting the organization and cleanliness that spoke of professional standards maintained through years of consistent discipline. Every surface was spotless. Every tool was in its designated place. Every ingredient was properly stored and labeled. Giuseppe had built something substantial here, and now it was her responsibility to maintain and protect it. "It feels like accepting command of a unit that's already functioning at peak efficiency," she replied. "My job isn't to change what's working, but to support the people who've made it successful." She typed back to Rebecca, "More than ready. See you tomorrow afternoon." Isabella had been watching Sarah's expression during the text exchange, and something in her face must have revealed the weight of what was about to happen. "Mrs. Martinez, are you having second thoughts about any of this? Because once you sign those papers tomorrow, there's no taking back what happens on Thursday evening." Sarah thought about Emma's customer profile, the 18 months of reservations that excluded her mother while building a relationship with the restaurant that Emma had claimed as her own. She thought about the casual dismissal embedded in staff notes, the assumption that her mother wasn't sophisticated enough for fine dining, the systematic exclusion from family celebrations that had been planned months in advance. "Isabella, my daughter spent over a year establishing herself as a valued customer at this restaurant while telling your staff that her mother wasn't the kind of person who belonged in establishments like this. She's been using Bella Vista to create a version of herself that doesn't include the woman who raised her and sacrificed her military career to provide Emma with every opportunity she's enjoyed." Sarah paused, choosing her words with the precision she'd once applied to operational briefings where clarity could determine mission success. "Tomorrow, I become the owner of the restaurant she's claimed as her place. Thursday evening, she'll discover that the woman she's dismissed as unsophisticated is actually the person responsible for creating and maintaining the elegant experience she's paying premium prices to enjoy." Isabella nodded slowly, understanding both the personal motivation and the professional implications. "And we're going to make sure that experience is absolutely perfect, aren't we?" "We're going to make sure." "It's exactly what she ordered," Sarah replied. "Sophisticated, elegant, memorable, and entirely under the control of the woman she's spent 18 months excluding from her life. 24 hours until closing. 48 hours until Emma discovered that her carefully curated social venue had just become considerably more complicated than she'd ever imagined. The smoking gun wasn't a single dramatic revelation, but a pattern of systematic exclusion documented in reservation records and customer notes. Emma hadn't simply decided to exclude her mother from one holiday dinner. She'd been building an alternative social identity that specifically required her mother's absence to function properly. Thursday evening was going to be very educational indeed. Sarah didn't act immediately. Instead, she positioned herself strategically. The closing took place on Wednesday afternoon in Rebecca's conference room, with Giuseppe looking genuinely emotional as he signed the final transfer documents that ended 20 years of restaurant ownership. He handed Sarah the keys to Bella Vista, with the kind of ceremonial weight that acknowledged she was inheriting not just a business, but a legacy built through decades of careful attention to quality and community service. "Mrs. Martinez, I have never sold a business to someone I trusted more completely," Giuseppe said, as they shook hands for the final time as seller and buyer. "You understand what this place represents, and you have the strength to maintain what I've built while making it your own." Sarah felt the weight of actual ownership settle around her shoulders like a mantle she'd forgotten she knew how to wear. The restaurant was hers now, the Victorian mansion with its carefully restored architectural details, the commercial kitchen with its professional-grade equipment, the wine cellar Giuseppe had spent years stocking with bottles that complemented, his seasonal menus, and most importantly, the reputation for excellence that would either flourish or deteriorate based on her decisions as owner. Rebecca had prepared a comprehensive transition binder that contained everything from insurance, policies and equipment warranties to vendor contracts and staff employment records. The legal complexity of restaurant ownership was staggering, Sarah realized as she reviewed document after document that defined her new responsibilities to employees, customers, suppliers, and regulatory agencies. "Sarah, I have to ask one more time," Rebecca said as they finalized the paperwork. "Are you absolutely certain about your timeline for tomorrow evening? Because once Emma discovers you own the restaurant where she's hosting her family dinner, there's no controlling how that situation develops." Sarah looked through the conference room windows at the late afternoon light filtering through downtown buildings, thinking about the progression of events that had brought her to this moment. Emma's casual dismissal, the months of planning her parents' excluded Thanksgiving, the customer profile that revealed systematic exclusion disguised as social sophistication, and now the reality of owning the establishment her daughter had claimed as her personal entertaining venue. "Rebecca, I've been thinking about this for 2 weeks. Emma made a calculated decision to exclude me from family celebrations, while simultaneously using my exclusion to build relationships with people she considers more sophisticated than her military mother. She's been telling restaurant staff that I'm the kind of person who doesn't belong in establishments like Bella Vista, while positioning herself as a valued regular customer." Sarah paused, organizing her thoughts with the precision she'd learned through years of military briefings. Tomorrow evening, she's going to discover that the woman she's dismissed as unsophisticated actually owns the restaurant where she's trying to impress Brad's parents. That revelation is going to be uncomfortable for everyone involved, but it's also going to be educational. Rebecca nodded slowly, recognizing the determination that had carried Sarah through military service and was now driving her approach to family conflict resolution. "All right then. You officially own a restaurant. Try not to get yourself arrested for disturbing the peace tomorrow evening." Sarah drove directly from Rebecca's office to Bella Vista, using her new keys for the first time to enter through the staff entrance. The restaurant was closed to customers on Wednesday evening, but Marcus and Isabella were there preparing for Thursday's holiday service, their movements efficient and purposeful, as they coordinated the final details of what would be Sarah's first day as a restaurant owner. The kitchen hummed with controlled activity as prep cooks completed advanced preparation for Thursday's menu. Turkey breasts were brining in large containers. Side dishes were being prepared in quantities large enough to serve 200 guests, and desserts were cooling in the walk-in coolers after 3 days of careful preparation. The operation reminded Sarah of military logistical centers during deployment preparation, the same attention to detail and systematic execution that ensured mission success under pressure. "Mrs. Martinez, welcome to your restaurant," Marcus said, looking up from the prep station where he was reviewing final cooking schedules. "How does it feel to own a place like this?" Sarah walked through the kitchen, noting the organization and cleanliness that spoke of professional standards maintained through years of consistent discipline. Every surface was spotless. Every tool was in its designated place. Every ingredient was properly stored and labeled. Giuseppe had built something substantial here, and now it was her responsibility to maintain and protect it. "It feels like accepting command of a unit that's already functioning at peak efficiency," she replied. "My job isn't to change what's working, but to support the people who've made it successful." Sarah walked through the kitchen, noting the organization and cleanliness that spoke of professional standards maintained through years of consistent discipline. Every surface was spotless. Every tool was in its designated place. Every ingredient was properly stored and labeled. Giuseppe had built something substantial here, and now it was her responsibility to maintain and protect it. "It feels like accepting command of a unit that's already functioning at peak efficiency," she replied. "My job isn't to change what's working, but to support the people who've," she typed back to Rebecca. More than ready. See you tomorrow afternoon. Isabella had been watching Sarah's expression during the text exchange, and something in her face must have revealed the weight of what was about to happen. Mrs. Martinez, are you having second thoughts about any of this? Because once you sign those papers tomorrow, there's no taking back what happens on Thursday evening. Sarah thought about Emma's customer profile, the 18 months of reservations that excluded her mother while building a relationship with the restaurant that Emma had claimed as her own. She thought about the casual dismissal embedded in staff notes, the assumption that her mother wasn't sophisticated enough for fine dining, the systematic exclusion from family celebrations that had been planned months in advance. Isabella, my daughter spent over a year establishing herself as a valued customer at this restaurant, while telling your staff that her mother wasn't the kind of person who belonged in establishments like this. She's been using Bella Vista to create a version of herself that doesn't include the woman who raised her and sacrificed her military career to provide Emma with every opportunity she's enjoyed. Sarah paused, choosing her words with the precision she'd once applied to operational briefings where clarity could determine mission success. Tomorrow I become the owner of the restaurant she's claimed as her place. Thursday evening, she'll discover that the woman she's dismissed as unsophisticated is actually the person responsible for creating and maintaining the elegant experience. She's paying premium prices to enjoy. Isabella nodded slowly, understanding both the personal motivation and the professional implications. And we're going to make sure that experience is absolutely perfect, aren't we? We're going to make sure. It's exactly what she ordered, Sarah replied. Sophisticated, elegant, memorable, and entirely under the control of the woman she's spent 18 months excluding from her life. 24 hours until closing. 48 hours until Emma discovered that her carefully curated social venue had just become considerably more complicated than she'd ever imagined. The smoking gun wasn't a single dramatic revelation, but a pattern of systematic exclusion documented in reservation records and customer notes. Emma hadn't simply decided to exclude her mother from one holiday dinner. She'd been building an alternative social identity that specifically required her mother's absence to function properly. Thursday evening was going to be very educational indeed. Sarah didn't act immediately. Instead, she positioned herself strategically. The closing took place on Wednesday afternoon in Rebecca's conference room, with Giuseppe looking genuinely emotional as he signed the final transfer documents that ended 20 years of restaurant ownership. He handed Sarah the keys to Bella Vista with the kind of ceremonial weight that acknowledged she was inheriting not just a business, but a legacy built through decades of careful attention to quality and community service. Mrs. Martinez, I have never sold a business to someone I trusted more completely, Giuseppe said as they shook hands for the final time as seller and buyer. You understand what this place represents, and you have the strength to maintain what I've built while making it your own. Sarah felt the weight of actual ownership settle around her shoulders like a mantle she'd forgotten she knew how to wear. The restaurant was hers now. The Victorian mansion with its carefully restored architectural details, the commercial kitchen with its professional-grade equipment, the wine cellar Giuseppe had spent years stocking with bottles that complemented his seasonal menus, and most importantly, the reputation for excellence that would either flourish or deteriorate based on her decisions as owner. Rebecca had prepared a comprehensive transition binder that contained everything from insurance, policies and equipment warranties to vendor contracts and staff employment records. The legal complexity of restaurant ownership was staggering, Sarah realized as she reviewed document after document that defined her new responsibilities to employees, customers, suppliers, and regulatory agencies. Sarah, I have to ask one more time, Rebecca said as they finalized the paperwork. Are you absolutely certain about your timeline for tomorrow evening? Because once Emma discovers you own the restaurant where she's hosting her family dinner, there's no controlling how that situation develops. Sarah looked through the conference room windows at the late afternoon light filtering through downtown buildings, thinking about the progression of events that had brought her to this moment. Emma's casual dismissal, the months of planning her parents' excluded Thanksgiving, The customer profile that revealed systematic exclusion disguised as social sophistication, and now the reality of owning the establishment her daughter had claimed as her personal entertaining venue. Rebecca, I've been thinking about this for 2 weeks. Emma made a calculated decision to exclude me from family celebrations while simultaneously using my exclusion to build relationships with people she considers more sophisticated than her military mother. She's been telling restaurant staff that I'm the kind of person who doesn't belong in establishments like Bella Vista, while positioning herself as a valued regular customer. Sarah paused, organizing her thoughts with the precision she'd learned through years of military briefings. Tomorrow evening, she's going to discover that the woman she's dismissed as unsophisticated actually owns the restaurant where she's trying to impress Brad's parents. That revelation is going to be uncomfortable for everyone involved, but it's also going to be educational. Rebecca nodded slowly, recognizing the determination that had carried Sarah through military service and was now driving her approach to family conflict resolution. All right then, you officially own a restaurant. Try not to get yourself arrested for disturbing the peace tomorrow evening. Sarah drove directly from Rebecca's office to Bella Vista, using her new keys for the first time to enter through the staff entrance. The restaurant was closed to customers on Wednesday evening, but Marcus and Isabella were there preparing for Thursday's holiday service, their movements efficient and purposeful as they coordinated the final details of what would be Sarah's first day as a restaurant owner. The kitchen hummed with controlled activity as prep cooks completed advanced preparation for Thursday's menu. Turkey breasts were brining in large containers, side dishes were being prepared in quantities large enough to serve 200 guests, and desserts were cooling in the walk-in coolers after 3 days of careful preparation. The operation reminded Sarah of military logistical centers during deployment preparation, the same attention to detail and systematic execution that ensured mission success under pressure. Mrs. Martinez, welcome to your restaurant, Marcus said, looking up from the prep station where he was reviewing final cooking schedules. How does it feel to own a place like this? Sarah walked through the kitchen, noting the organization and cleanliness that spoke of professional standards maintained through years of consistent discipline. Every surface was spotless, every tool was in its designated place, every ingredient was properly stored and labeled. Giuseppe had built something substantial here, and now it was her responsibility to maintain and protect it. It feels like accepting command of a unit that's already functioning at peak efficiency, she replied. My job isn't to change what's working, but to support the people who've made it successful. She watched through the pass as James, the sommelier, presented the first wine pairing with theatrical flair that delighted Brad's parents. Emma was glowing, clearly pleased with the impression she was making, pointing out details of the restaurant's ambiance and explaining the seasonal menu with the confidence of someone who'd established herself as a valued regular customer. Sarah straightened her charcoal blazer, checked her reflection in the stainless steel surface of the commercial refrigerator, and walked into the dining room with the steady confidence of someone who belonged exactly where she was. She approached table 12 as James finished explaining the wine selection, her presence commanding attention without requiring announcement. Emma looked up with the polite smile she reserved for restaurant staff, then froze as recognition dawned across her features like sunrise over a battlefield. "Good evening," Sarah said, her voice carrying the same calm authority she'd used for 22 years of military service. "I'm Sarah Martinez, the owner of Bella Vista. I wanted to personally ensure that your Thanksgiving celebration meets all your expectations." The silence at table 12 stretched long enough for other diners to notice. Then Emma's voice emerged as barely a whisper. "Mom, I understand this is your first Thanksgiving dinner at a restaurant," Sarah continued, addressing the entire table with professional warmth. "I've instructed my kitchen staff to prepare our finest seasonal menu for your family gathering. I hope you'll find the experience memorable." Brad's father, clearly confused by the family dynamics suddenly playing out before him, managed a polite response. "Thank you, that's very thoughtful." Sarah met Emma's stunned gaze with the steady eye contact of someone who'd learned that some lessons could only be taught through demonstration rather than discussion. Emma, you mentioned that Bella Vista was becoming your place for special family occasions. I wanted to make sure you knew that your family is always welcome here. The emphasis on family hung in the air like incense, carrying weight that everyone at the table understood even if they couldn't articulate it. Emma's carefully planned evening had just shifted from controlled performance to uncharted territory, and Sarah could see her daughter calculating how to navigate this new reality. "Please enjoy your dinner," Sarah said, stepping back with the professional courtesy that had defined the entire interaction. "I'll be ensuring that everything meets our highest standards." As Sarah returned to the kitchen, she heard Brad's mother whisper urgently to Emma, "Darling, I had no idea your mother owned this place. How exciting." Marcus was grinning as she entered the kitchen. "Mrs. Martinez, I think your point has been made. Your daughter looks like she's just seen a ghost." "She's seen something she thought she'd left behind," Sarah replied, watching through the pass as Emma struggled to explain the situation to Brad's parents while maintaining her composure. Sometimes people need to be reminded that the relationships they dismiss don't simply disappear because they find them inconvenient. The evening proceeded with flawless service, each course arriving perfectly timed and beautifully presented. Sarah didn't return to table 12, but her presence filled the restaurant like a benevolent spirit, ensuring that Emma's first Thanksgiving dinner away from home was exactly what she'd ordered: sophisticated, memorable, and entirely under the control of the woman she'd tried to exclude. As the last guest departed and the staff cleaned the dining room, Sarah found a handwritten note left at table 12. Emma's distinctive handwriting covered a napkin with 3 simple words: "We need to talk." Sarah folded the napkin carefully and placed it in her jacket pocket. Tomorrow, they would indeed talk. But tonight, she was a restaurant owner who'd successfully served nearly 200 guests their Thanksgiving dinner, including 6 people who'd learned that family relationships don't end simply because someone decides they're inconvenient. She'd purchased respect with the deed to a restaurant, and the investment had already begun paying dividends. What did you think of Sarah's approach to handling family dismissal? Have you ever had to prove your worth to someone who underestimated you? Drop your stories in the comments below. I love hearing how you've turned the tables on people who wrote you off too early. And if you enjoyed watching Emma discover that her excluded mother was actually running the show, smash that subscribe button, because next week I'm sharing the story of a teacher who was told she was too old to understand technology, so she became the school district's highest paid IT consultant. Trust me, you don't want to miss how that played out. Thanks for watching, and remember, never underestimate someone just because they're quiet. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who smile politely while taking notes.